Grimgar's a dark place. Here's my review of Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash.
Who's the one and only master?
I am.
Alright, so I first started watching this show when my wife started watching it, and to be perfectly honest with you, I really had no intention of actually liking the show. For a couple of reasons. One, I feel like the sort of RPG fantasy world genre in anime is getting a little overdone, and there's a lot of shows out there that sort of get lost in the shuffle. And at first glance, to be perfectly honest with you, I thought that this show was going to be one of those anime that do get lost in the shuffle. But I proudly admit that I was wrong. Now, this is a first impression. I haven't seen the entire series, nor have I read the manga, so I can't really judge it based on that, but I have heard good things. For those of you who don't know what this show is about, it follows a group of travelers that are thrust into this fantasy-like world where they're given no other options than one job. They're forced to work as volunteer soldiers where their only task is to kill monsters in the surrounding area. They do this because the real soldiers are out there fighting wars, getting land, whatever have you that a soldier would do, but they're far too busy to take care of their homeland. As compensation, the volunteer soldiers are able to basically take whatever treasure or things that the monsters that they kill drop and sell them for currency. Staying consistent with MMOs, they're actually able to join classes eventually, like the Thief class, Mage class, and other ones, where they're able to then gain skills that are going to help them fight stronger and stronger monsters and hopefully gain more and more currency. But as far as the synopsis goes, that's basically it. They're thrust into this world. They have no idea how they got there. They have very hazy memories of their past. All they really know is their name and the fact that they use words sometimes that they have no idea what the meaning is, but it just feels natural to them in their normal speaking way. Now, what really makes this show appealing, at least for me, is the fact that this is a very human-driven story. A lot of anime in this type of genre only focus on action as their main selling point, so they don't really have a lot of character depth and a lot of character development in the show, but they have awesome visuals and awesome fighting. And while this show does have its fair share of fighting, which I'm going to get to in a minute, I do believe that what really sells this show is the emotional connection that you end up feeling with the characters. This show does a phenomenal job of making you feel emotionally connected to the characters. And I think that's because they take time with the little stuff. They take time with seeing these characters develop over time, seeing them face loss, and seeing them kind of deal with loss in their own individual way. While most shows would be perfectly fine having you witness the death of a main character, having the other characters have a little grieving session for maybe a whole episode and then having them move on, this show really takes its time, and from the very first death that you experience in this show, they never really fully move past it, and it motivates their characters going into the future. And what's even better is, while there are multiple characters dealing with the same sort of death in their own way, the show takes time out of its busy schedule to actually explore how each character is feeling, and so you get to know them through their emotions rather than just through random actions or random action sequences. Another thing that really stuck with me in this show is seeing them do their first kill, for a couple of reasons. It wasn't because they were extremely badass and it was a really cool fight scene. In fact, quite the opposite. After a couple days of nearly getting themselves killed by trying to fight multiple animals at the same time, they think, hey, why don't we take on the weakest creature one at a time? So they actually ambush a lone, like, golem or troll, and what ensues is actually a very odd fight for me. And that's because the animal that they're fighting isn't just some golem that they're going to get experience points from or treasure from or whatever to get gear and move on. It actually has its own personality. It's fighting tooth and nail for its life. So the end result isn't just something that you're doing in a fantasy world RPG far away where you're just gaining experience points. In fact, what they're participating in that moment, at least to me, was a murder. It was brutal and uncomfortable, and you get the feeling that the main characters didn't feel good after committing this act. And that's something that carries into the entire show. It isn't just a fantasy world that they're in. This world is very real for everyone involved, the monsters and the humans alike, and every loss, everything that happens to them hits them on an emotional level, and you really just don't get that in other shows, and that's fantastic to see on screen. There's also a really solid balance between the visual style in the show and the world that we're given, because the visuals in the show are quite stunning. There's a lot of beautiful scenery. The world is very pretty and very pristine, but what really lies beneath is a very dark world that's extremely unfair to the people that live in it. And this unfairness is not something that's just skirted under the rug to use as a later plot point. This is something that they're dealing with on a daily basis. Now, I do have two main issues with Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash. The first one is that I think this show does suffer a little bit from poor pacing. I can get past all of the dialogue and all of the little weird stuff that goes on in between What I don't like is there are quite a few episodes where the show just takes a weird turn where they just decide to do like a musical number. Not like the characters are actually dancing or anything like that, but they just play like a song as if the series is over, you know, that kind of song. And they spend like 5 to 7 minutes on songs like these, and they do this in a few episodes, and I think that's just really just wasted air and wasted time. Like, they just didn't want to move on to the next plot point because they wanted to cleanly end the episode, so they just do like a musical thing just to kill time, and it felt like they were killing time, and I really didn't enjoy that in the show. My second thing really isn't a fault of the show, more of a fault from Funimation. So I have been watching dubbed and subbed more recently, mainly because I now subscribe to Funimation's app. I use it on my PS3, my PS4, and a couple other devices. And for the most cases, their dubs are actually really solid, really well put together. But I don't think this is a show that translates well into a dub. Now, while I do think that's partly because it's a very dialogue-heavy show, and that doesn't translate well into a dub, the other reason is that the main character's voice acting in the English dub is very boring for me. He's got a very bland voice. He doesn't really sound that interesting, and I get bored very easily in the show when I watch the dub versus the Japanese subbed. But other than those two things, this is an awesome show. I do recommend it if you want to get an RPG fantasy-style world anime that is different than other things that you've seen in the past. It's got awesome visuals, awesome action, and you feel invested with the characters, and the world that they're building is extremely interesting. So I do recommend giving this anime a shot. But those are my thoughts on Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash. What were your thoughts? Have you seen the show? Let me know down in the comments below. And as usual, remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and go to madmazreviews.com to get more of our amazing content. I look forward to seeing you next time.
Now, if you will excuse me, my plane leaves shortly.
You are going on a quest for knowledge?
No, I'm going to visit my mother in Miami.